All right, welcome back. In this episode, we are diving into all things anxiety, how to uncover the subconscious root of your anxiety, which is the reason why your anxiety exists, the reason why you don't even realize you have anxiety. So it's the actual root of the anxiety underneath the anxious thoughts, how to uncover what those are. And then, of course, I'm going to share with you my 4-step framework to eliminate and rewire anxiety from the inside out so that you can be mentally and physically free of the anxious thoughts that are currently running your reality for you right now. My name is Gianna Bedot. I'm a certified hypnotherapist, somatic coach, meditation teacher, and spiritual guide. And if you do feel you need some deeper support beyond what you receive here in this episode, I've linked many resources for you to dive into to get started on your subconscious rewiring and inner healing journey in the notes below. But make sure that you especially grab access to the Rewired meditations. There's over 50 subconscious activations and self-hypnosis meditations to help you go deeper within yourself, rewire, reset, reprogram, recalibrate from the inside out by tapping into the power of your subconscious mind. So check those out in the links below. And of course, as I mentioned, there's plenty of other resources for you to dive into that are free, that are paid. Check it out in the notes below. All right, let's dive into it. Anxiety, a very important topic that needs to be talked about. So many human beings are walking around inherently, unconsciously anxious, literally 24/7. It is the mental disease of our time that we are always anxious, we are always overthinking, we are always in this state of total chaos from the inside out. And many of you don't even realize that you are inherently and unconsciously anxious all day, every day. You just think you're thinking thoughts. You just think you're human. You just think maybe even this is just how it is. This is just how I am. Well, I'm here to remind you that you're not here on planet Earth to live anxious, wired up, and chaotic 24/7. That there is a reality in which you are allowed to feel calm and grounded in your mind and body. That you can move through your life feeling peace from the inside out. That it's actually safe for you to feel calm. And so, the first piece of this that I really want to dive into before we get into the 4-step framework to eliminate and rewire anxiety is to bring you home to the truth of why your anxiety actually exists. So, the real root reason why you have such deep rooted anxiety, unconscious anxiety that you don't even realize is running behind the scenes of your mind, running your life, running your behaviors, running your thoughts, is because anxiety is unconscious, which means it is rooted in your subconscious. And there is a deeper level fear underneath the anxious thought. So, this means that the anxious thought you're thinking isn't actually the anxiety. There's actually something much deeper. There is a fear behind this thought that is fueling this thought, that is causing this thought or thoughts, this spiral of thoughts, to repeat. And yes, of course, anxiety can be one anxious thought that just keeps repeating, or for many of you, it's a spiral of anxious thoughts. And behind that one anxious thought or behind that spiral of anxious thoughts, there is a subconscious fear. There is a fear that you do not likely even realize is causing you to feel so anxious. So, this topic actually really hits home for me. I am someone who has been practicing the tools of yoga, of meditation for probably over 15 years now without doing the math in my head as I'm recording this. And there was always this level of unconscious anxiety that was always running behind the scenes, no matter how much yoga I did or how much meditation I did. there was always this unconscious fear that I couldn't label, that I couldn't put my finger on, that was always causing me to have this anxiety, to have this, for me, a spiral of anxious thoughts around certain topics. And what I discovered personally was, for me, there was a fear that if I wasn't anxious, if I didn't think the worst, then the worst would happen. That by thinking of the worst and overthinking all of the negative or terrible scenarios, that I could actually prevent them from happening. That if I voiced them to others, that if I told others how I was feeling or all of these irrational fears, that it would prevent it from actually happening. Now, we all know that this is a false fear. It's a false belief system. And that is what fear is. It's false evidence that appears real to you at the time because that unconscious belief thinks it's keeping you safe. So, this was a belief system that I inherently developed as a child as a survival mechanism to deal with the things that were going on in my life. That if I overthink about them, if I try to predict what could happen, then maybe that bad thing wouldn't happen again. So this was a learned behavior for me. And now this may be different for you. All of these fears will show up differently for all of us. But for me, it was this inherent belief that if I think through all the worst case scenarios, then I can prevent them, then I can be safe from what could go wrong. So this was my subconscious believing that this is how it kept me safe because as a child, this is how I believed I kept myself safe. I overthought, I overthink, I did a lot of overthinking, and that made me feel like I was protecting myself, that I was keeping myself safe by playing out all the scenarios, by voicing them, by, releasing them through anger to people I cared about, that they would know you can't do this to me. People in my life, past relationships. If I spiral out in anger, if I show you how upset I will be if XYZ goes wrong, then you won't do that to me. Then I won't get hurt. Then you'll know this is not what I want. So you won't do it. And that was how I learned to survive. That's how I learned how to show up in my relationships from a teenager on. And I thought it was serving me, but as I became an enlightened and conscious adult through my journey, through the subconscious, through yoga, through meditation, I learned that it actually wasn't serving me. And while yoga and meditation helped me soften this part of me and keep this part of me at bay, it didn't eliminate it. Because again, it was subconsciously and inherently wired into my mind. And when a belief system is wired into your mind, there is no level of yoga, of working out, of personal development that is going to rewire this part of you unless you intentionally rewire your subconscious. And this is why I'm so, so grateful that I found subconscious work and hypnotherapy because this was the absolute catalyst for me in my life. Before finding subconscious work and hypnotherapy, again, I was keeping this part of me at bay and many other parts of me at bay and becoming more aware and awake to the reality that these parts of me, yes, they do exist. And I was also awake that, yes, these parts of me do exist and aware of my behaviors and aware of my mental patterns. I wasn't actually able to change them. So while I was becoming more awakened and more aware and more conscious through the work I was doing, through yoga, through meditation, through deep, deep psychology and inner programming, through yoga and meditation and all of the personal development and spiritual work I was doing, I wasn't actually rewiring the part of me that needed to be rewired to fully and completely transform. And so this is the work of the anxious individual. The work of our life as anxious individuals is uncovering the programming, more specifically, the fear-based programming that is causing the anxious thoughts, that is causing you to feel anxiety in your body, anxious thoughts running through your mind 24/7. And when you can uncover what that fear is or what those fears are, maybe there's many, many fears, then from there, there's a process. There's a journey that can begin for you to actually heal. But until you know what that subconscious fear is, you can't rewire it. So, to sum this up before we move into the 4 step framework, it's extremely important for you to know and remember that your anxious thoughts that you're thinking, it's not the real thing that you're actually anxious about. What you're actually anxious about is a fear based thought that is rooted in your subconscious mind. It is a fear based thought that you do not even realize is causing you to feel so anxious in your mind and in your body, that is reaping havoc on your nervous system. So, anxiety is again rooted in unconscious fear based thoughts that were created from experiences that you've gone through that were maybe traumatic, that you haven't healed from yet. And this fear based thought that resulted from this trauma or this negative experience is making you believe that by having this fear based thought, it is keeping you safe and it is protecting you. So, to sum this up, under the root of it all, your anxious thoughts are really protective mechanisms. They're subconsciously trying to keep you safe. And by uncovering the anxious thoughts alone, it's not enough. To actually be free of your anxiety, you have to uncover the subconscious fear that is fueling the anxiety. So, here is the 4 step framework that I have created, that I have used personally many, many times, and that I share with my clients to eliminate, rewire, reset the anxious nervous system so that you can be free from your anxiety. Because let's be real, anxiety isn't just anxious thoughts that drive you insane. Anxiety is energy that you feel in your body, it is stress, it is nervous system dysregulation. And this stress, these anxious thoughts in your mind, this chaos in the mind and body, it shows up in every area of your life. It affects every area of your life, even though you don't realize it. It affected all my relationships for me. It affected my relationship with myself, with my business, with everything before I was able to reclaim it and become aware and awakened to what was actually going on, which was, again, this subconscious fear based programming that I needed to heal and rewire. So, here's the 4 step framework. This is something that you can begin doing on your own today. Now, if you have very hardwired fear based thoughts, if you have been through any level of trauma that you suspect or know has caused you to have these anxious thoughts, I highly recommend that you do this work with a professional, someone who is a professional in the subconscious, who is trauma informed, who can support you in healing through this correctly, properly, and safely so that you can actually transform and heal from it for good. And of course, this is the work I do with my clients. And so if it feels in alignment for you to connect with me, you can feel free to check out the application to work with me one-on-one and just fill that out, and I will reach out to you and we can talk more about what's going on and if I think I can help you right now. All right, so let's dive into this 4 step framework. Step 1 is identifying the anxious thoughts. We cannot get to the unconscious fears if we have not identified all of the anxious thoughts. So all of the anxious thoughts that you're currently thinking, all of the ways that the anxiety is showing up in your mind and body, getting really clear and identifying what those anxious thoughts actually are. That is step 1. So the way to do this is to simply take some space and time for yourself, closing your eyes, and ask yourself, what am I actually anxious about? And for some of you, the answer may come up immediately. For others, you may need to take a different route. For some of you, you may need to do what I call an observation of yourself, a self-observation, where you take about 1 to 2 weeks to observe your thoughts, to observe the way you feel in your body, and to take notes. So have an open note in your phone where you can simply write down all of the anxious thoughts that are coming up for you and that you are thinking throughout your day. And as you do this self-observation exercise for 1 to 2 weeks, then you'll get to know the anxious thoughts that are coming up for you over and over again. Something else you can do is leave an open notebook on your countertop or on your desk where you work every day. And as anxiety comes up, as these anxious thoughts come up, just write them down. Write them down, and you'll have a big list of all your anxious thoughts, which may be overwhelming, but it's also extremely enlightening and eye opening for you because you get to know yourself and you get to know the thoughts that are inherently running your reality, that are unconsciously running your day to day life, your relationships, your work, your mothering, your parenting, literally everything that you're doing every day. So it takes some time to get really clear on what your anxious thoughts actually are. And once you've identified what your anxious thoughts actually are, you can get clear on what anxious thought is most prominent. And when you've identified which anxious thought is most dominant, most prominent, then you can start to uncover what the fear is underneath that anxious thought. So, what is the fear underneath that anxious thought? What is the actual fear? And you can actually go back to the example I gave you, right, of myself. My true fear was if I'm not anxious, then things are going to go wrong, right? There's an unconscious fear that is rooted in your anxiety. Now, this part may be a lot trickier than identifying the anxious thought, which is why I highly recommend this step either be done with hypnotherapy or self-hypnosis or using the Rewired meditations that I have created for you. You can grab access to those in the link below. There's processes and audios that guide you through this process. But this part, it may be the most difficult part because you have to tap into your subconscious, which is not something that is usually easily accessible in your normal conscious waking state, especially if you are someone who is anxious. So you really need to calm the nervous system down. You really need to get quiet to access your subconscious and your unconscious fears. You have to go deep within yourself. And the way you do this is by tapping into the theta brainwave state. This is the brainwave state that you're in, for example, just before you cross over into sleep. It's not a sleep state. It's simply a state of light daydreaming and deep relaxation, nervous system relaxation, which again is a state you're likely not in if you're anxious. So to dial down the anxiety and to get you into the state where you can access the subconscious, it's extremely, extremely important that you do take some time and space to dial into the subconscious, to tap into the theta brainwave state. And you can do this again through the recordings that I've already created for you if it is difficult for you to relax. So if it's difficult for you to relax, you don't need to make this process more complicated. You can just tune in with an audio recording and it will take you down, down, down to ground zero within yourself so that you can just relax, be with yourself, see what is in your subconscious, understand the programming that is running and fueling your anxiety. And this is the space you'll be able to actually uncover the fear that is driving your anxiety. This step is probably the most important one because if we don't identify the fear, then we can't rewire it because you don't know what you're rewiring. Knowing what the anxious thought is alone is not enough because, again, as I mentioned, the anxious thought that you're feeling and thinking on the surface is not what you're actually anxious about. So we need to uncover what you're actually anxious about, which requires you to dive into the subconscious. So by diving into the subconscious, you're able to relax, go deeper within yourself, feel this ground zero state of just total mind body bliss, if you ask me, and get to know yourself on a deeper level, awaken to yourself on a deeper level, and understand and get to know yourself on a deeper level, especially the fears that are running your anxiety and running your life. So, in this state of total relaxation, when you are at ground zero within yourself, you can ask yourself this question: what am I actually afraid of? Why do I believe, insert your anxious thought, why do I believe this anxious thought? What is actually behind it? Write these questions down. These are some of the questions you're going to ask yourself. What is the fear behind my anxiety? What is actually driving and fueling my anxiety? Okay. And once you've uncovered what that fear is, step 3 is rewiring it, is inserting a new belief system that actually reflects how you want to show up in your life, what you actually want to believe instead of the anxiety, which is the total opposite. This part is very easy. This is identifying how you want to feel instead, which again, also a very important step, probably the easier step. But once you've done the deeper work and you've uncovered what those anxious thoughts are, then you can easily say, okay, I want the opposite. I want to feel this instead. I want to think this instead. I want to believe this instead. And once you get really clear on how you want to feel instead and what you want your life to look like instead, then you get to wire it into your subconscious, which again requires accessing the subconscious. And if you need support doing this, as I've mentioned many times, the Rewired meditations will help you do this, or you can reach out and we can do this work together one-on-one. Rewiring definitely sometimes does require support, especially if you're not an expert in the subconscious mind. So you can check out my resources below to support you with actually rewiring your subconscious. And then step 4 is living in alignment with the reality that you want to live in, the reality of calm, of grounded energy. It's having a clear, concise visualization of what you want your life to look like, feel like, and living it, creating it every day. And to live this life, to have this reality, it starts by visualizing it in your subconscious. So spending some time every day, closing your eyes and visualizing the reality that you want to be living, the way you want to be feeling, really seeing yourself as that calm, grounded, connected person, which is again the opposite of anxiety. So having this deep visualization, because what you visualize in your mind is what you will begin to create in your day-to-day reality. This is how your subconscious works. Your subconscious mind is like a garden. Whatever seeds you plant into that garden are what will expand and grow. So the seeds that you plant in your garden are the thoughts you're thinking, are the visualizations that you're closing your eyes and having, and you're planting these visualizations and thoughts into the subconscious so they can expand and grow. So step 4 is spending time realigning your subconscious, realigning your reality, and visualizing the reality that you want instead. So this is the 4-step process. It is a beautiful, very powerful process that I highly, highly, highly recommend that you begin trying on right away today. You don't have to live in a state of inherent unconscious anxiety. You can be free. You can be free of it. I'm living proof. I'm working on it still every day. And the more you do this work, the more aware you become, the more awake you become, and the easier it becomes to actually get rid of anxiety as soon as it comes up. You can identify it and say, nope, that's an anxious thought. I don't choose it. I don't want it. It's my anxiety. It's not my actual reality. And this is what starts to happen when you do this work. It's not that anxiety never comes up for you. It's that you are awake and aware to it immediately. And you have this power to say, no, I don't choose this. No, cancel, cancel, cancel. That is not my reality. That is not my thought. That is simply just a fear. And I dismiss it. I choose this instead. And you keep coming back to the reality that you want to have, the reality you want to feel, the thoughts you want to have, the way you want to feel in your body. You come back to that over and over again every single day. So if, again, you feel you need deeper support doing this work, anxiety is a tricky, tricky topic, then please reach out, check out the resources that are linked for you in the notes below, and just know that you're not alone. Our population is inherently anxious, and it breaks my heart every day, which is why I do the work I do. You're not alone, and you don't have to live this way. So if you want to be free, you can start doing this work. You can begin your healing process. You can live in peace. It is possible for you. You were not just born this way. You are not destined to be this way. You can be free. And I promise that it is possible for you. So if you love this episode, make sure you subscribe and you hit that notification bell so you don't miss a single episode along this incredible journey. And I'll see you next time.